Okay. If you are fine, then give me a start. If you're ready, then you can start the session.
Hi everybody. We are now all together in front of John Behrens, who will talk us about Agile, DevOps and Quality Assurance.
Yeah.
Hi, John.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to my talk. It's a clash about between Agile, Quality Assurance, and DevOps, and I'm going to tell you a bit about of my experience I have through several projects where I had several rules inside these topics. That's me, John Behrens. I live in North Germany, in a region called Holstein, and I'm myself, and I have been a developer. Then I went through Agile Coach. I fulfilled roles as tester, as Scrum Master, mostly I call myself an Agile QA coach. And besides usual work, I have some hobbies like martial arts. I worked as a lifeguard at the beach. I do photography, which you see inside my presentation, and I went cycling. You can find me on Twitter. I got my own website, Skills for Teams, and even got a channel on YouTube if you like to know more. And let's start with the talk. I was thinking about this talk for some days. I had it before, and tomorrow I went out to take a picture of the sunrise, and I live at the Baltic Sea. That's where the sun is going up. Maybe over there in Brussels, you are more attended to go to the North Sea. I lived even at the North Sea before, and there you can see the sunset. What is the sunrise? It's kind of a feedback loop or feedback cycle, we call it in other things. So you get feedback that a new day is starting, and you even can do measurements by the sunrise. For example, today the sun were rising on another point as it's getting winter and at another time. So the sunrise tells you a lot about what time is in the year. And generations before us, before they had a watch and a calendar, they used the sun and the measurement of the sun as an orientation for example, bringing out seed or things like that. Yeah, so we have one basic concept, which is called a feedback loop, and we can do measurements even on that kind of loop happening again and again. Before I had this topic in Stockholm at the DevOps days, and it's even an agile principle to iterate over times to make them better. And here you see this iteration. It was actually the sunset in Stockholm at the evening of my presentation. I hope next year maybe I can do one from Brussels. Let's see. So I'm gonna tell you about my experience in projects. And there are some things I think you need for being successful in anything you do. It does not matter what you do. If you have a hair studio and cut someone's hair, if you have run a bakery, if you run, for example, a patat store, so selling fries, Belgian fries, and that are some things which are even in common. You have to have them if you're DevOps, if you're a tester, or if you're an Agile coach, and that is you need the right tools. And this is an example I took from my cycle trip to Roskilde in Denmark. That's where they built ships, the old Viking way. So they built ships like the Vikings did it. And what you did for it is you need to have the right tools. For example, a saw, an axe, and so on. You need to have the skills to use the tools, but you need to have another thing, which I call mindset. So if you want to build a ship, you need to have men who want to go on a trip with a ship. And that's one of the most important things you need. If you have the right mindset, you can build the tools and build the skills. For that, you can develop it. And with the mindset, you have the idea, and people will bring out the other things. That's even about Agile and DevOps. The mindset can create tools and can create skills. And mostly skills do not, mindset does not approach automatically just for implementing the right tools. What I will explain, I have some people inside. I used to play with Lego, as you see, and I have some figures, and maybe one or the other is similar to someone I met. I don't know if anyone is watching and remembers himself. I got the traditional DevOps engineer, and he has some certain mentality. I say DevOps or Ops engineer for somebody who comes from the purpose of being an administrator. And the tools are in at the moment, they change from time to time. It could be command line still, automatization, scripting. Grafana is a popular tool. Ansible, Chef, Docker, Kubernetes, different clouds, Google Cloud, K8s, Amazon Cloud, for example, and new things are approaching from time to time, maybe Terraform or Docker Compose. So the tools vary, and there will be a new one next week, I'm pretty sure. Then you need certain skills, and a skill set is mostly configurations of environments that run software and hold it stable, and analyze failures is really important if you run operations, because from time to time there will be an incident, and analyzing and even stopping the incident, handling it, will be an important thing. Then there's the mindset, and I wrote it as a sentence. He says, I am the master of the operational platform. I run the process and keep them stable. Deliver fast and satisfy the customer. So I implemented satisfy the customer here. Maybe it's not all the way, but he's a good guy. He's an agile guy. So that's included. That's the traditional DevOps engineer. We have another mindset for someone that is a tester, and there could be different mindsets from testers. They use tools like JMeter, Selenium, HP Quality Center, Jira, Cucumber, explorative testing, maybe Cypress, some JavaScript testing tools. New ones are approaching, certainly. And the main skill is finding bugs, analyzing code, execute tests, and writing reports. Writing reports is even a skill you need sometimes. At some points, there are audits you have to pass with your software. Some points you just write reports because anyone is likes paper or PDFs. The mindset is, I prove software by bringing it to its limit and improve it by showing its errors. And that's another mindset. In Agile, testers and integrated to the developers team. But it's good to have this mindset, no matter if it's in one person who is like split person, developer and tester mindset as well, or you have a certain person with this mindset inside your team. Yeah, that's some experience I share for you, and I will tell you how I met these people inside real project experience. It's some projects I experience. Sometimes people ask me, hey, John, what is your role? Are you a developer, or are you tester, or are you Scrum Master? And that's even a reason why this talk was approaching, because I think you need more than one discipline to make a project working. And this one is my first time as a DevOps, and it was with a famous German newspaper called the Bravo. Bravo is for about young people. They call it for like 13 to 17-year-old people, and they have actually they have a certain page which says my first time, and this is why I call this my first time as a DevOps. And Dr. Sommer is a famous doctor who answers letters from young people inside this magazine. Yeah, my role was Scrum Master there, so they booked me as a Scrum Master, and I came with a challenge in. We did not have a team, we did not have servers, we did not have any infrastructure, and we did not have a test environment. The mission was rebuilding an old website to make it a kind of social media community. There's some some rules, like if you do a Scrum exam, there will be a question which says, is there something like Sprint Zero? And there is nothing like Sprint Zero. But actually, in the real life, I think there is something like before the project is starting. And I was working as a Scrum Master, but because we didn't have any infrastructure and we didn't have a team yet, I need to do something. And that's why I was setting up the server. And actually, my colleague, who was an administrator, asked to me, hey, John, you are also a bit DevOps, because I just was installing a server on some virtual machine. It was about, when GitLab started, so about 10 years ago, this project, or almost, I think, 8 years ago. So DevOps was quite a new term, and just for me opening a console, installing a web server, which was something web developers did for years. They asked me, hey, John, you are DevOps now. So this is the first time I came up with a DevOps. The challenges in that team was, one thing we had the advantage, we could plan infrastructure and quality assurance before we started with coding, actually. And that's a good thing. So we decided for a strategy with a lot of automated testing. And we decided for an infrastructure. At that time, it was called built on Vagrant. So infrastructure as code, which was a pretty new approach. One thing was getting something to show, and we also had to build quality in. So we needed to create an iteration, while we also wanted to be at high quality in testing. And we also did one thing. We did early testing of data migration. We called it continuous migration. So usually, sometimes you create a new website and then you try to import the old data. That's something we started with. So we don't have that big approach at the end. We could switch over easily. One of the learnings was GitLab was the best tool for managing Git repositories at that time. Now they went to the stock exchange, I think last or the week before, then they was quite starting. And it was even beneficial to have a good repository to change the code. So one source they could interact. And it's useful to have showable results fast, so we could gain feedback on it. That was one of our learnings there. And let's come to the next project, so we can have some questions about it at the end. The one thing there is, I was hired as officially as an ISTQB tester. So they named the role like the testing certification. And I came into a project at a big insurance company, and insurance companies are companies who have a lot of money and can afford to run a project for a longer time. So they were running this project for years without deploying anything. If you go to, they just can't do it. It's sometimes it happens that kind of companies run project for years, and they even had a lot of approaches. There was no integration environment, and having no integration environment means you do not get feedback. You don't have a feedback loop for the environment, and even don't have a feedback loop for integration, which is bad in an agile way and in the way of DevOps, and even in the way of testing, because if you don't have that integration, you cannot test it, you cannot get feedback, and you cannot inspect and adapt it. And there was no documentation of the operational requirements of the application. So to set it up, actually, I had to ask a developer who was running it on his machine. So basically he says, we have the software running. And then he said like, oh yeah, it's on my laptop. And I can tell you how to install it. And that's, one thing which was difficult. It was not so good. So what did we do to solve these problems, these challenges? I was asking me like, where's our test system? They had it on a notebook. So what could we do to manage these challenges? And one thing was setting up. I was hired as a tester, but we were actually setting up a test system with a DevOps style infrastructure as code. In Agile, we would call it like integration and creating something to test on to give fast feedback. Another thing was the developers and the QA department had a very bad relation. I was sitting there, and when I came into the developer studio once and I asked for a simple thing, I don't know, maybe I think it was the unit test results. And he was getting crazy. He said to me, "Oh, you testers always come up to us and you always want something. We can't serve you." And I was like, "Hey, I just asked you for some running some stuff and work together." And that actually I find out before me or the other testers were fighting to the developers. I had a testing colleague. He had the approach of, yes, as a tester, I show that the developers are bad, that they make errors, and are basically, he says, like developer idiots. So one thing I had to fix this relation to a solution-oriented relation. So the developers don't see the QA department anymore as someone hesitating them and blame them. They see the QA department as someone who served them. So some friends who could provide stuff which makes their job easier. On further steps, if you have developers and QA in one team, it's even good. If you have a certain team for QA or maintaining QA tools, could be called an enablement team or platform team, or maybe a community of practice for quality assurance. It's the same approach. So they should provide services for the developers, so they don't see each other as as enemies, but as someone who helps them. Yeah, the operations were completely away from that project. That was like anti-DevOps. So operations were in another building, and they have never spoken to operations, which is, for a project already running for years, quite strange. Yeah, and there were even different contractors on that project. And by contractors, I don't mean freelancers like me, but bigger companies, and they were trying to blaming each other and kick each other out, which was not a productive partnership. So it was kind of anti-agile project. I learned myself that this business in that kind of enterprises is slow, or at least was slow at that time. Some things you cannot change. For example, they had certain dress codes, and it was hard. Sometimes I was blamed for coming into office just with a shirt like today, and it was not so funny, but it was not so bad as well. It was just more, kind of boring building. That was one project where I learned a lot. I was hired as a tester, and we adopted some agile methods or some agile testing methods like explorative testing. We also set it up some early of BDD, but the most challenge we had was like integrating that stuff together. And that's why I did more DevOps stuff. So we were creating Vagrant and Ansible at the time to have the best documentation for our infrastructure, which you could have. And that is infrastructure as code, because infrastructure as code is executable. And it's even, kind of agile, because the Agile Manifesto says working software over a comprehensive documentation. And actually, infrastructure as code for me is, working software and not only documentation. Yeah, that was one project I made. And I certainly go on to another company, and there I was firstly hired as an Agile quality coach. So they needed someone who can train with their Agile coaches and with their teams to integrate quality and come to a concept of build quality in. They had a very strange state before. So when I came there, they said, we're going to send out a CD to our customers. I don't have a CD here, otherwise I would show you. But if a CD were lying around, mostly it will be an old music CD. But they were actually still sending out one CD per year to the customers. They were starting implementing Agile methods, so they already had Scrum teams, but they had like this iteration problem of feedback loop of one time per year. They had an integration period which was quite bad, and it was really hard to get a a working kind of software. They started in October with the CD and then did an integration phase, code freeze for development. And this was a kind approach. And some people said to me, yeah, that new work methods, they work for Google or startup companies, but they don't work for us. That's some sentence I've heard more often. And sometimes I say, yeah, people need to experience that things work for them to make them unsure that, to remove that feeling it would not work for them. So what we actually did is we created a build mechanism for an automatic build when everybody said it's so hard to do and it's not possible, but we just built it the first one, the best one we could get. And we introduced new methods. And there's one method I really like. Sometimes I even do exercises about it. It's about acceptance test-driven development, which means we have the user stories described as executable tests in Gherkin language. Without this tests became readable, they became human readable, and you could even create this ATDD Gherkin stuff with this specification by example approach inside the planning sessions. So instead of just a user story, we had this Gherkin examples attached to the story, and I was even able to make make the product owners who were mostly more business focused to commit it inside the version control system. So actually they were writing Gherkin feature files, and this were used to verify quality. And even we migrated all tests from an own created framework to this new Gherkin approach. So tests and frequently execution of tests became part of their day-to-day business, of their feedback loop. Before they had like 1 year feedback loop, and we shortened it to a feedback loop of, I think the first approach was once per week, and the next approach was already once per day. That was a huge challenge, and it was a huge success. They extended it to more teams. I think they scaled it up to the whole company. And it was technical methods and methodical methods from Agile working together. So the aspect of creating frequent releases was actually supported by the technical possibility of automatically building the software. So CI/CD played together with the Scrum approach of creating iterations. That's where both benefit from each other. And for me, it's the thing to say, you cannot always say what comes first. There were a lot of people who want to release more frequent, but actually because of the software was so hard to build, there was just a build team who could do it. They did not do it. So the technical approach was not enabling their mental approach. You could start in implementing a system, creating easy releases, or you could start creating this mentality first. It works out, most times. That was it from project 3. And the next one, I was hired as an Agile coach and QA coach. So my approach was, I had an Agile team where I mostly fulfilled Scrum Master function. And we also had an approach of community of practices. That means, we having a community of practice together built from several teams to do certain stuff. One was called DevOps. They handled on infrastructure as code. And the other one was called the release group. They improved the release, so made the release easier. It was a legacy project, and they had various test systems. Like there's I think 7 test systems. And to actually run a test, people had to reserve a test, say, oh, tomorrow I want to test something on test system 7. Can you please reserve it to me? And actually, at some points, we had discussions like, oh, yesterday I want to run something on test system 7, but I did not know you were running something on test system 7, so the test didn't work. And actually the tests were not stable, which is always a problem, because we were running the test and they say, okay, it has been red, but if we run it again, it will be green, maybe, or we run it again one more time and it will be green again. So the tests were not stable. We wanted to switch on a new version of PHP at that time, but we could not install it. Yeah, that was a challenge. How did we go it on, and how did we make it? We implemented configuration as code for the test environment. So we reduced the limit of 7 test environments by having infrastructure as code to solve them and just create them on demand to make the test execution independent from the constraint of systems. So the system was launched on demand by infrastructure as code. New server started. I think it was a Kubernetes, inside a Kubernetes cluster, a Docker container to run the test. We even did infrastructure as code or configuration as code for the test runners and containerized the application to make independent testing possible. That was like where DevOps approach removed our limit from being able to executing tests, and we were able to create more iterations easily, which even shortens the feedback loop for our other Agile process. And the other thing we did was removing all that flaky tests. Except of having tests which execute sometime, we were dividing it into a legacy suite where tests were executing sometimes, and a hardened suite which having only the tests which execute anytime. So if the hardened suite failed, we were sure there was something wrong in the code. And the thing in the unhardened, in the flaky test suite, we moved them time by time to the hardened suite to have only tests which even gives us a real feedback if it's running or not. And the learning was continuous improvement is more sustainable than a big change at once. Because first we thought about having a big approach to migrate the whole test suite at once or do everything at once. And finally, they did not start for months or for years because they think it's so much work. With a new approach, we were able to do it in smaller steps. And with smaller steps, we had a faster success rate. So one thing I was doing for that was building up this community of practice. And I made some really good experience for that because we had a community of practice working on one topic, like test improvement. We get people from all teams in, everybody who was involved inside that software testing could come there. And one really good thing we made is we decided it should not be a coffee round where people come in and talk. We actually made it a meeting where we were doing some stuff. So it was for 2 hours, and we were actually working on improving some tests with mob coding, except of just sitting there and talking. Within the coding sessions, obviously some things fell out which we could do in tickets inside the usual teamwork. But that approach of really doing stuff was one of the success factors. Instead of having a coffee round where everybody comes to talk and just philosophes about what could we do. Actually, better do one thing right in that kind of meeting, and then other things will fall out and could be do inside the usual teamwork. And it's even creating some kind of mindset that before that company had a lot of talking rounds, and then actually stuff by stuff, things were getting better. So the next approach, it was an approach where I came in and they hired me as an Agile coach. There came to operations department. Before, mostly I worked together with operations departments, but that time was the first time I was inside it and actually part of it. And the mission was, they had a data center inside the building, and they decided maybe someday we're going to move, and it's better to move the data centers to the cloud. They even had like a power supply unit which were going old, and they didn't want to buy new ones. That was another reason why moving it to the cloud. So the mission was like moving an old data center, having certain kind of computers inside to a new cloud system. They had like legacy application, multi-legacy applications. A lot were running on an IBM WebSphere, AS400 machine, and one challenge was it was a company having a performance peak. So e-commerce company traditional having this performance peak in December when everybody is going for Black Friday and Christmas. And yeah, sometimes they said things like, we don't have the time to do it right. We had even like some constraint inside. So what were the clashes at that project? And this one was like, we need to do performance testing before we actually could migrate stuff. We need did monitored A/B live testing in production for quality assurance. We did infrastructure and configuration as code, and actually that also needed quality assurance because we need to make sure everybody understands it, and we needed to make sure it's made in a good way. And they were not used to hold experiments, so we need to enable experiments, need to enable the mentality for that, and to make that people the approach of experimenting to make it possible. Some learnings were resting is not testing. So if you just create something and don't do anything with it, it's not being tested. And you cannot test all things in advance. So the fast feedback from the live environment is really essential if you do infrastructure things or if you do other things. So if you enable running tests on the live environment, you have some big advance. I even came to a lot of agile challenges. Like in that one of the teams, there was this classical thing. There was one guy who could do the most stuff. He was there for like 10 years, knowing everything which was undocumented, and the other guys were not able to do all the stuff. So we decided to remove that constraints. So he didn't want to be the only responsible guy for everything anymore. So he could also do new stuff. And finally, one solution was, at some point, we forbid to do him task. So one rule was for a certain time, he was only allowed to do pair programming or pair things to spread this knowledge and remove that silo, remove that constraint, which is approach. It was hard at the beginning, but certainly it worked out and things were coming better and the knowledge were split and exchanged better inside the team. So if you ever have that problem, that silo problem, it's a good method to solve is go enable pair programming or do more pair programming on that topics, and even create awareness. And it's because it's even a people thing, you need to be aware that you take the people with you. So the silo needs to be with you as well as the others learning from the silo. That was my project experience where I did different things and where I always come together again on doing DevOps, Agile things, and quality assurance together. Now I have some learnings, and you can already submit some questions because there will be a time to answer your questions later, and maybe share your experience where, DevOps or QA approaches even had positive or negative effect, or where you clash together inside your projects, because I would like to talk about with you. Let's come to the learnings I had. And one learning is prediction versus production is always a challenge. Yeah, you should keep your predictive environment close to production. It could be done by DevOps, and it could be done with testing. And mean time to production is something which should be reduced. If you have a traditional Agile approach, for example, Scrum, when I started with Scrum, for some people it was a challenge to create a release every 2 weeks. And that's where the first tools were built, which were continuous integration, or tools which were making it more easy to create a release every week. If you have something fully automated, which allows you to release several times per day, for example, I just heard Amazon is releasing about 20,000 times per day. I'm not sure if it's really true, but if releasing comes really cheap, and it comes cheap for you from ID to production in a short way, you can have a faster feedback loop and certainly do test more stuff. And that's what's helping you at any stage. So the fast feedback is always helping you. With Scrum, the minimum feedback loop is about four weeks, if you have 4-week sprints. But with DevOps, you could have shorter feedback loops. And actually, by the new Scrum Guide, it's not forbidden to release every day. You just have the review and retro as another feedback loop implemented every 2 weeks, even if you do several releases per sprint. Learning from each other is impossible, and you need to enable the mentality of learning from each other. When I remember the project where developers and testers were pretty far from each other, they did not learn from each other and fight each other, it was not a good solution-based mentality. In the other projects, I learned a lot from other people, from developers, from operations. We were having actually a productive partnership. You don't need to become a DevOps, or you don't need to become a tester yourself, or even a UX graphic designer or whatever. But if you understand the way of thinking they have, and know a bit about their mentality, about their tools and skills, it's easier to find out where you can help each other and how you can make a project productive. Yeah, seeing each other as friends is good. You could even learn something from the business auditor, whom you maybe don't like that much because he asks you a lot of stuff. Operational requirements need to be considered early when you want to run a software, because they're actually part of your business. And that's where DevOps comes in, and where DevOps comes into Agile. To create a product, it's not only creating the software running on some system like this laptop. It's about creating a software and run it. So I think the Agile way is working software requires a working system. And for automatization itself, so for the new tools, you also need to review it and to do quality assurance, and some kind of planning would also be beneficial. Yeah, there we have the feedback cycle. Actually, in the DevOps world, they call it mostly feedback loop, but it's meaning the same stuff. In Agile, it's a Scrum value, this feedback cycle. In a QA, there's also kind of principle. For example, if you ever talk with QA people, maybe traditional ones, and they tell you, it's really, they have a waterfall approach, or they want a long test period or something. There's a test fundamental. Actually, it's a test fundamental principle 3 if you run the ISTQB stuff, which says you should start early with testing, and even says like an error has less cost as faster it will be found. In DevOps, you call it a feedback loop. So the feedback cycle is some essential thing inside your project. Yeah, what does DevOps approaches mean for quality assurance? And that's infrastructure or configuration as code helps to document requirements and ensure quality. So with the DevOps approach, you move the documentation of your system requirements to working software on the other side of the Agile manifesto. So infrastructure as code, you have working software and need less documentation about it. You can reduce test system costs and effort. So if you can easily set up them, you don't need to maintain them that much. And having environments early enables fast feedback for your product. Yeah, and one thing I have, which I see different, is the role mindset. I meet certain people who had a role mindset like, oh, I'm a tester, I just test stuff and I don't care about the other stuff. And the mission mindset. And the mission mindset enables you to fulfill a certain mission, no matter what your actual role are doing. And for example, that one thing I was hired as a tester, but as the main problem was integrating our test system, I mostly worked as kind of DevOps engineer by creating that kind of integrating the systems automatically. Yeah, that is the end of my talk. And now I would really like to see what's your experience and, of course, your questions about how can you use a combination of DevOps, Agile, and QA principles inside your project to bring it to a success. Did we receive some questions so far?
It's perfect, but if it's not over,
Not yet.
Not yet.
So, guys, do you have any question? Nobody of you have to face a problem?
At least I would like to know if everybody had some disagreement with somebody from the QA department. That's one of my favorite questions.
Is there someone? One question? But not
there's
really. Yeah.
One mark like most bugs are not a lack of quality, but a sign of long feedback loops. That could be. Also, a lot of bugs are kind of communication failure. And that's one thing why I like the ATDD approach so much, because you actually have examples which make sure your communication becomes an executable test. So it's even a layer of communication, this Gherkin language, which makes it less less prone that communication errors approach.
Someone asked, what is a DevOps?
DevOps. That's a good question. Actually, so many people ask me what is DevOps.
We don't have the whole day to explain it.
There's so many answers on what DevOps is. If you look to, for example, Scaled Agile Framework, I had this question, what is DevOps? The correct answer was there. It's an approach to make development and operations working more close together. And that's the sense, and it has cultural and technical approaches. So you need tools and skills and mindset for it, like I told at the beginning.
Okay. Here, Olivier says teams are facing issues because QAs are most of the time overwhelmed on story validation and no time for exploratory testing. Any advice?
Well, why should the QAs do exploratory testing alone? I have a very good experience with setting up an exploratory testing session with the whole team. So bring everyone together. no matter if he's QA, no matter if he's product owner, and you can even bring stakeholders in. And then you set up an explorative testing session for like half a day or 2 hours, and maybe run 2 journeys of it, and you actually get something out. On the other hand, you could also enable time boxes for doing it yourself. When I was tester last time, I just did explorative testing every time in the morning while drinking my coffee, because that project, it was easy to find bugs. And it's even kind of what do you benefit if you just force him on pushing all the stories, or if he's receiving some kind of reward or feedback for just finding bugs in an explorative session, he will even more likely do it. But I would start with that kind of sessions. They always worked out for me. So schedule it, set a time box for it. You can introduce it into the planning meeting, having an explorative testing session next sprint, and go for it.
Okay. Is there a world in which QA as a role is no longer relevant? What does that world looks like?
It is coming more and more teams. By original Agile, the Scrum team is responsible for quality. So in a small company, mostly the team is responsible for quality because they just don't have a QA department. And in larger organizations, I see it more frequently that you have still a QA department, or maybe just some things where QA comes together, but QA people also assigned to the teams, while the QA responsibility could be also be split more over the teams. So maybe they have one responsible for testing or traditional tester inside the team, but it does not mean the others cannot help him in performing, for example, the story test or story validation.
Okay.
That's always in these teams. You certainly see that there's a bottleneck approaching. Like if they have one QA guy, at the end of the sprint, they say, "Oh, everything is in the QA column on Kanban board, and we are ready with our sprint. And now just Peter, our QA guy, has to fix everything." And with spreading the responsibility on the whole team, you can avoid that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. Next one. As a QA in Agile organization, shouldn't the QA should be more role helping the dev testing with the QA and not leave all to the QA?
That is the thing I just told. That could be, for example, setting up a test suite, maintaining the test, or doing pairing together. All the things work out. Or even sometimes SQA, maybe you create the CI/CD scripts, take care about executing them, introducing new tools, and helping people. It depends, but it should be as approach which is being done.
Is there another question?
We got 2 minutes left, right?
Yeah, in fact, there is a small break of 10 minutes right now, but if there is something in the chat. Why should QA be the only one's validation? Someone answer, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. In the case of the Agile principles, the whole team is responsible for quality, and the whole team could approach it. That's why I like the things where people work together. But at some points, even for me, it helps to take the perspective of the tester, even like of the evil tester I told before, of the one coming to the code and trying to find errors to actually prove it's not working. And you can switch over to that mentality for yourself. So you see it from another perspective. Like coming in on Friday, you have a bad day and say, okay, now I'm trying to crash the software and find some bugs. So
Kido.
I think we're reaching to the end.
Yes,
Thanks for having
absolutely.
me here in the virtual Brussels. And maybe next time I can come up and having some flams de patat or something.
Maybe thanks
From-
to you, John.
Yeah.
And we hope to see you in Brussels. Maybe next time.
Okay. Then have a nice day. Rest day of the conference. If you got questions, just write me on any channel you find, LinkedIn, YouTube, or email. And hope you go on and implement some good collaboration of QA testing and DevOps Agile. Thank you for
Thank
watching.
you. Thank
Bye.
you, Bob. Thank you, John. Bye. Dear all, now we have 10 minutes break and the next session will start at 3. The next session are change but start with what you do now with Bianca Griffin and measure outcomes with Gino who was here with us. So let's have this small break and let's meet in the other sessions. Thank you.